Chapter 3, 7:10 p.m., Tuesday, March 26th. The last rays of evening peeked between the buildings, filtering through the haze hanging over the East River. Steam rose from the water, and Marcus Perry tried to figure out what caused the strange phenomenon and the smell of rotten fruit that followed. Science had never been his strength. All he knew was that he felt cold, leaning against the metal of the armored truck. Neither his coat nor uniform kept the chill at bay. He shifted uncomfortably, moving his shotgun from right shoulder to left, keeping his elbow from cramping. Marcus looked at his watch for the third time and then back toward the entrance of the 7-Eleven, staring at the door as if deep focus would somehow force his partner to abandon his quest for donuts. "What the hell's taking so long?" he spat under his breath, looking up and down the street to make sure no one witnessed his frustration. Passers-by ambled along the sidewalk, oblivious to his tirade. A man selling T-shirts at a makeshift shop simply smiled and nodded his head. The truck radio blared against the other sounds of life, and Marcus refocused on the WNYM commentator, spouting his thoughts on the current climate of terrorism in deep baritone. "The federal government isn't issuing any statements since the last 3 attacks because either they don't know anything or they know too much. They're either in collusion or incompetent, and I'm not sure which I'd rather them be. Why has the White House remained silent except for their same old press packet rhetoric? You know as well as I do." Marcus nodded in agreement, returning to his vigil of the 7-Eleven front door. He had seen the footage of the different incidents on the news, but couldn't bring himself to worry too much about weirdos shooting lasers and demanding stupid stuff. How could anything so abnormal have any real impact on the life of a Brinks driver from the Bronx? "This is what, the 4th incident in 3 weeks?" the commentator continued. "Where are these guys coming from, huh? What about the weird ray guns? I don't even know how many millions of dollars in damage they've caused, plus, 20 injuries on top of that? And their names! Are you serious? There was the Dementor guy who appeared twice spouting about retribution, and then, what was the last one from last week? Apex Predator, yeah. I didn't even know what to say. They all show up around the same time, and we're supposed to take it as a coincidence? If you don't think this is a military operation meant to make us run to the protective arms of Uncle Sam, you're fooling yourself." "Joe, come on," Marcus yelled in the direction of the 7-Eleven. "You'd think I've been gone for 10 minutes, Joe replied as he exited the convenience store, half walking, half wobbling. He held a cup of coffee in his left hand and balanced 3 chocolate donuts in his right. The pastries would not be shared. "You have been gone for 10 minutes, you stupid dick," Marcus countered. "And where's your gun? You leave it in the store?" Joe took a bite out of the top donut and motioned with his head. "It's in the truck! Christ, calm down!" Marcus rolled his eyes. He hated when Joe ate in the truck. He also hated when Joe left his gun unattended. "No one robs armored cars anymore," Joe would say, and while he spoke true, Marcus didn't like leaving anything to chance. "Just don't get sprinkles everywhere," Marcus said as he moved to the driver's side. "I only got chocolate glaze. Take a breath, jeez," Joe replied, grabbing for the door handle. "Call Tom and tell him to hurry with his run so we can make Carnegie for dinner before they close." Joe got no further. A flash of blue filled Marcus's field of vision, and his partner slammed against the side of the armored car like he'd been hit by a bus. Joe ricocheted off the metal and flabbily bounced onto the pavement. For an instant, all Marcus could think was how comical it looked as Joe's arms and legs folded over and under his limp body, like a marionette carelessly tossed across a room. If he had seen the video on YouTube, he might have laughed. Terror quickly replaced amusement as he realized this wasn't a fail video. A mass of shiny black unitards walked toward him, 6 in all. Their distinct clothing separated them so completely from the surrounding environment that Marcus hesitated to level his weapon. Each person wore a head-to-toe bodysuit, like a group of masochists on their way to a pleasure bar. Their silver goggles sparkled in the fading sunlight, as did the strange straps and pouches adorning their belts and upper arms. 3 of them held what were instantly recognizable as chrome rifles of some sort, bulky and oversized like someone had spray-painted a bunch of Nerf guns. "Son of a bitch," Marcus breathed. He pointed his shotgun toward the men, fumbling with the safety. The man at the T-shirt stand cursed loudly and ran inside his building, while other pedestrians cried out and bolted from the approaching men. Marcus had never used his shotgun in the line of duty before. The impulse to fire was so all-encompassing, it wasn't until he felt the trigger push back against his finger that he realized he'd missed the still-engaged safety. The lead assailant suffered no such flub, firing his chrome rifle without a word. Blue energy cascaded from the barrel, rippling through the air like a stream of water. Droplets of pure cobalt spiraled up from the main tide and dissipated as quickly as they formed. Marcus watched in slow motion, admiring how the energy danced toward him, unaware of the concussive force behind its magnificence. The blast hit Marcus full in the chest, throwing him against the side of the armored truck. He landed heavily on the street, face scraping roughly against the pavement. A moment passed before he realized he was still conscious. He tasted blood, cracked ribs searing, his nose obviously broken. Asphalt pebbles pressed painfully against his cheek. People screamed and tires screeched as drivers slammed on their brakes, but the sounds came from far away, echoing from another world entirely. The agony in his chest and face, however, embraced him intimately. Despite the torment of his wounds, Marcus craned his head to the right, focusing on the strange men. Their faces may have been covered in masks, but their posture belied broad smiles and feelings of easy power. It was as if they had just won a high school football game, and though they felt the thrill of victory, they didn't know what to do next except stand there with childish enthusiasm. Their composure reasserted itself as another man approached the truck. His tall, muscular build dwarfed the other men. He walked with grace and determination. The fabric of his uniform appeared similar to the others, but with red accents running along the arms, torso, and legs. Red piping came over his forehead in 2 lines ending in points on his brow. He looked perpetually scowled. His piercing eyes needed no ornate goggles like those of his underlings, and his mask only covered his face from the nose up, exposing his mouth to the open air. He parted the group of henchmen like a rancher moving cattle and walked to the side of the armored car. A metal device dangled from his hip, about 4 inches thick and 8 inches square. Rounded edges linked with an almost ornate series of cuts in the chrome, culminating at a small red orb in the center. The man removed the mechanism from his belt, pressing it against the truck's armored siding at chest height. It adhered easily to the metal as if pulled by a magnet. From the 4 rounded corners, he disconnected attachments fixed to wires and extended each to the far ends of the truck side in a large X shape. The attachments began to glow hot, shooting a red beam of light between them along the top, bottom, and sides of the vehicle, connecting the units in a scarlet square. The ruby lines brightened, billowing smoke. The metal began melting away along the beam's edge, dripping molten steel like thick syrup down the side of the truck. An intense heat also burned beneath the central unit, turning the siding varying shades of orange as sirens echoed in the distance. A pungent, organic vapor reached Marcus's broken nose as he hugged the ground, observing the movements of the man in black and red. A hissing sound, followed by a blast of exhaust from the device, punctuated the moment. The group's leader removed the smoking apparatus from the truck, the attachments pulling back into the main unit as if on springs. He handed it to one of his associates, who instantly dropped it like a hot potato. The device clattered against the sidewalk, while the vinyl-clad underling awkwardly attempted to retrieve it with only his forefinger and thumb. The armored truck groaned, metal pulling against metal. The entire side of the transport came free and slammed to the ground in an ear-splitting crash. The leather-clad men scurried out of its way. Their disorientation provided Marcus with his moment. He pushed himself up from the street, ignoring the ache in his chest, and reached for his shotgun lying a few feet away. His attackers began scampering in and out of the truck, carrying bags of cash, while their master stood back, silently watching. Normally, Marcus and Joe would have little more than a few $100,000 in their truck on any given day. This evening may well be different, Marcus thought. Their last pickup had been at the City Bank on 34th with a convoy of 3 trucks. 2 grabbed the normal cash transfers, and the 3rd picked up bills for disposal. Sometimes that 3rd load could be in the millions. No one ever knew which truck was which, so that losing it in a robbery wouldn't be as big of a worry. Today, Marcus had a feeling he knew which team hauled a big load of cash. He also had a feeling the police weren't going to arrive in time to do anything about the theft. Marcus lunged for his shotgun and stood to face his attackers. He wobbled slightly, blood rushing to his head, vision blurring. Pain shot through his chest and neck, but he pushed it aside, clicking the safety off as 2 of the men noticed his movement and turned to face him. "Fetish freaks," he said, unloading the 4 shells, always at the ready in his weapon. One of the men took the brunt of the first 2 blasts full in the chest and fell backward, buckshot tearing through his sternum, heart, and lungs. The assailant next to him took the third shell to the left arm. He dropped his silver rifle and gave a muffled cry through his mask. The others dove for cover as the last of the 4 shots sprayed into the gaping hole on the side of the truck. Before the sound of lead had ceased echoing in the armored car, the big man in black and red had picked up his subordinate's discarded weapon and raised it towards Marcus. The movement had been so fast. Marcus tried to fire a 5th time, but only the clicking of his empty shotgun answered his effort. The masked man pulled his trigger, and for the 2nd time in as many minutes, the blue energy billowed impossibly fast toward Marcus. Even as adrenaline slowed the movement to a crawl, he had no time to respond. The blast hit him in the face, snapping his head back with the force of a horse's kick. His body flailed toward the street, feet kissing the sky, and crashed down in a heap on the road. "Show me the body," Travis Gage said with authority. A uniformed police officer pulled back the white sheet, revealing the broken corpse of a man in a security guard uniform, head twisted to the right unnaturally. Street lights shined on the man's name tag, accenting bronze against black letters. Marcus Perry, Gage read. 42 years old, shot by whatever gun the perps were using, the officer informed coldly. Has his partner said anything yet? Gage asked. He's at the hospital. They think he might have a broken collarbone. You get to see the other stiff? Not yet. I bet he's messy after getting a shotgun to the chest. Forensics is still over there, but I'm sure they'll let you take a look at some point. Or you could wait till he's at the morgue later tonight, your choice. All right, Gage nodded. Tell Kilpatrick my partner Barnes and I will just shadow for right now, and I'll share my thoughts with Mancuso when she gets here. You got it, Gage. The officer made his way toward a group of police at the end of the street, trying desperately to keep reporters at bay. The entire block buzzed with activity as darkness enveloped the scene. Gage blocked out the commotion, focusing instead on his work. The Midtown offices of the FBI sat less than 6 blocks from where the evening's incident occurred. Normally, the Bureau wouldn't get involved in city crime, but something this strange couldn't be left solely to the NYPD. They had excellent officers, but the investigation already seemed to be dominated by the ego cops who wanted their name in the history book. Gage cared little for that sort of nonsense, and luckily most of the men and women in his FBI offices felt the same. They had a job to do, and they would get it done. A hand grabbed his shoulder, pulling him around slightly. Fuller wants an update, Keith Barnes said as he handed Gage a cup of coffee. Barnes's close-cropped, flat-top hair made him look like a boot camp reject, but Gage appreciated how dutifully the man served, despite his choice in barber. I'm looking at clues right now, Barnes. Gage didn't take his eyes off the body. He sipped the flavorless excuse for coffee with a grimace. Barnes smiled, pointing at the corpse. That's a pretty big clue. You better pick him up and bring him with you back to the Bureau. Gage ran his fingers through his coarse salt and pepper hair, contemplating what he would say to their bureau chief. I'll call Fuller in a little bit, Gage said. He could at least give me some time to process what the hell happened here. I haven't even had a chance to look at the attacker's body yet. The 2 men walked over to a dozen NYPD officers in the middle of strategizing where to eat dinner. Gage recognized one of them instantly due to his 1970s porn stash, Detective Kilpatrick. They had worked together on a couple occasions, and Gage learned to trust the man's instincts. Kilpatrick saw them coming and moved to intercept the 2 agents. Mancuso will be down here in about 10 minutes, Gage. Kilpatrick flipped through the pages of his notepad. She wants your opinion on the residue left by the guns or whatever they were shooting. Of course. Have you found anything else? Gage asked. Not much, the officer continued. They don't seem to leave behind any burn marks or anything, so I'm not sure they're heat-based. I got a chance to go over the scene last week uptown with that guy with the big claws on his hands. What was his name? Apex Predator, Barnes said. Gage nodded. Yeah, anyway, it was the same there, no burn marks. Did you guys see anything on the traffic cams? Kilpatrick shook his head. Peterson called it in, and DOT is downloading the footage now to us, but Wallace, the guy who scrubs the footage, said that 2 of the cameras were out, the one looking east down 35th and another by the Javits Center looking west down 34th. We have some blind spots, Gage said. Barnes stepped a few feet away to answer his buzzing phone. Gage guessed who was on the other end of the call. We'll get more, Kilpatrick said confidently. We always do. Barnes walked back and handed the phone to Gage. It's Fuller. Update. Gage took the cell reluctantly. He knew Director Fuller's office had been under close scrutiny since one of his lieutenants got caught accepting a bribe 6 months earlier, but calling an hour into an investigation for an update still seemed a little excessive in Gage's opinion. "Sir?" he asked in a professional tone. "Gage, what have you got?" the director asked. "Not much yet, sir. Mancuso will be here in a couple of minutes, and she and I will go over all the details. Apparently, some of the traffic cameras were down, so the NYPD might not be able to find the vehicle the attackers used. We'll know by tomorrow morning. We're going through all the physical evidence now, and I've confirmed most of the details about the theft, but we're still really early to have anything definitive. I'll plan on talking to Hernandez tonight after the autopsy on the perp." Fuller took a breath on the other side of the line. Gage could feel the director's irritation through the phone, but a case like this couldn't be rushed. Working with the FBI meant you had to play the long game, taking your time and getting every detail right. Gage built his reputation on that strategy and was respected not because he had high-profile cases under his belt, but because he worked every situation with the same professionalism and patience. Some investigations could take years and thousands of man-hours to solve. Even so, Gage understood that right now, every news agency on Earth had their cameras pointed at the NYPD and FBI buildings waiting for some good news. "Keep me informed." Fuller ended the call abruptly. Gage handed the phone back to Barnes. His attention flew to the group of officers to his right as Captain Gail Mancuso walked with authority through the sea of blue police uniforms, long brown hair bouncing off her shoulder. Gage smiled to himself as her slight feminine frame somehow had the power to sift the crowd, cops twice her size scurrying out of the way. Her body language conveyed deep frustration, and Gage could only guess at the pressures resting on her shoulders as the public face of the NYPD. "You need to grow your hair out a little bit, Barnes," Gail said, shaking the man's hand. "I bet everywhere you go, people just assume you're an FBI agent." "Most of the time they think I'm NYPD, ma'am," Barnes replied. "You wish," she smiled, turning her attention to Gage. "Did you hear from Fuller?" "I did. I would assume that you did too." "No, I heard from Deputy Chief Nakamura, who heard from Fuller. Let's walk." Gail motioned for Gage to follow as they stepped away from the body. Barnes kept pace behind them, diligently scribbling notes on a pad of paper. "I bet there was a lot of shouting and finger-pointing," Gage said as they rounded the front of the armored truck. Two white-coated coroners draped a sheet over the second body. Gail pulled out a small flashlight and shined it on the cadaver, still splayed on the asphalt exactly as he had fallen after being shot. Blood dried slowly beneath the corpse, filling the textured indentations of the roadway with its sticky viscosity. "I'm sure they yelled plenty," Gail continued, nodding to one of the coroners in recognition. "Luckily, I wasn't in the room." "What the hell are we going to do, Travis?" She was the only law enforcement officer that called Gage by his first name. For some reason, it never bothered him. "Well, if you would resign as a camera cop and rejoin us on the street, I'm sure we'd have an easier time solving the case," Gage said. "I would love to be running a squad again, but I do have better hours now. Plus, I think I've done some good." Gage had to admit that her unique combination of beauty and experience had worked wonders for the NYPD's public image. "Travis?" Gail asked again, pulling Gage back to "Travis?" Gail asked again, pulling Gage back to the present. "Sorry," he stammered. "We don't have anything more than you do. Barnes called 6 other agents along the East Coast to see if they had any whispers of activity like this prior to the attack, but he came up empty. Nobody has anything." "What do we got then?" Gail asked. "More supervillains in New York?" "That's as good as a description as any at this point." "Oh, so at the press conference tomorrow morning with the mayor, I'm just supposed to say that Lex Luthor and the Joker are the #1 terror threats in the United States right now?" Gage smiled, appreciating the comic references. He'd miss the rapport. "That's why you're on camera and I get to do the real police work. There's a couple other things you're going to want to take a look at." "It gets weirder," Barnes added. "What do you mean?" Gail asked. "Follow us," Gage said as they stepped onto the sidewalk, strolling past the bloody corpse. "There's something weird about the body?" Gail asked. "Other than what he was wearing? No. That's not what we're here for." Gage pointed to the large hole in the side of the armored vehicle, melted edges mottled and knotted from intense heat. Gail's flashlight illuminated $20 bills littering the floor of the empty truck. "What the hell happened?" Gail asked in shock. "I know they robbed the truck, but did they blow a hole in it to get to the cash?" "The metal was melted off somehow," Barnes said. Gage nodded. Witnesses from one of the upper floors reported that after they took out the guards, a guy in a red and black jumpsuit used some device to remove a section of the truck. It only took 20 seconds to melt through the metal. Nobody knows how they did it. That's double-layered composite armor right there, steel and ceramic. It's tough stuff. The guards had picked up a delivery of bills going to the Treasury for disposal, so the perps got away with a lot of money, couple mil probably. They melted off the side of the truck? Gail repeated. There's more, Gage said. More than this? She asked, pointing toward the hole. Look down. At their feet lay the 4-foot square section of metal that had once been the passenger side of the armored vehicle. Gail shone her light on the bulletproof siding. In the center, flawlessly etched into the steel, read a single word: retribution. What does retribution mean? And how did they cut the word into the metal? Gail asked. The report I got said they were here for less than 2 minutes, and the first cops arrived on the scene shortly after. If you have any theories, I'd love to hear them, Gage said. Fortunately, the way things have been going the past few weeks, I'd bet we won't have to wait long until we learn the implications of retribution. It looks like it was melted into the metal by the same machine that cut the hole, Barnes postulated. But how it all works is beyond me. That Dimitri Dementer guy has mentioned retribution during both of his appearances. It has to be tied in. Gail rubbed her temples. This crap gets weirder by the day. I need a stiff drink.